Hey, so I have a funny political podcast. It's called The Political Orphanage. I also now have a sci-fi podcast, which is what you're listening to. But they used to be on the same show back when I had a daily program until they split apart, like cells dividing. So this prequel that you're listening to is both sci-fi and political. Stephen Kent, the notorious host of Beltway Banthas, came on to discuss the politics of Star Wars. Enjoy! I prepped for this by listening to several hours worth of your delightful podcast.
Wonderful.
And so I'm in a Star Wars mindset. And one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of getting into the politics of Star Wars is they allude to in, I think, episode 2, thousands of systems joining the separatists, right? Systems. So we can infer tens of thousands of planets, if not more, just in the separatist block, right? So the amount of actual planets that are sending senators to the Republic is, what would you estimate?
Somewhere in the ballpark of 6,000.
6,000?
Yeah.
How would you even have a functional parliament or senate with 6,000 people? How would that even look?
I mean, if you watch episode 1 and 2, you see it is clearly dysfunction.
Yeah.
It very much works like the British Parliament with just a lot of yelling and sort of competing for getting your voice to the front before somebody shouts order at you. It's not very clear. It's also not clear why they have to, in this sort of universe, send people all the way across the galaxy to be in Coruscant to actually attend this rabble, because they could just hologram in. There are so many ways I think you could more effectively govern across an entire galaxy besides bringing everybody in one room, except that politicians love going to the House and seat of power. So I think it just says a lot about politicians.
That could be why, because we technically could do that right now. We could just Skype in.
Yeah,
we don't have to
really
have
think a
blue
senator,
holograms flickering in order to have an actual remote presence there.
Yeah, I mean, do you think a senator from Geonosis actually wants to remain on Geonosis and represent the good people of that planet? They want to go to Coruscant.
The golf is better on Coruscant. The golf is far better on Coruscant, and the restaurants are really good. Yeah.
And so are the death sticks.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of reasons there too. There was a thinker here in America. I can't remember who it is, and I might do an episode on it. But he proposed having basically we should increase the amount of representatives we have, because originally it was one congressman for every 30 people or something like that. It was a lot smaller. And if we had kept that same proportion, we'd have like 1,200 representatives right now. And so his solution was do it, but basically have regional congresses as well and kind of dismantle this idea of a unitary capital doing everything. And I don't know that I would go full-blown that direction, but if I were living in the Star Wars universe, I think I would very much be either a federalist or I would probably want just like an agreement that we don't shoot each other. And maybe some kind of minimal force to keep order, but otherwise not like a giant imperial.
Well, the whole process of legislating in Star Wars has evolved in the official canon since the prequels. Leia, most notably after Return of the Jedi, when they are restarting the New Republic and starting democracy again, they break into two parties. They actually form political parties, which the Old Republic did not have. And you have one party which is highly focused, as the Populist Party, on dissolving the actual function of the Senate coming together and there being one single body that governs and makes laws for the entirety of the galaxy. And so Leia and her Populist Party very much believe in planetary rights, planet to planet and system to system governance, and not having the New Republic set laws for the rest of the galaxy. It's very interesting, and I don't think Star Wars entirely knows what they're doing when they say that, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is me. Like Leia's one of us.
Vermont wants to have single-payer health care, and Texas wants to have like a super free market version where you can form a health care co-op with your improv team.
Alderaan wants to have child labor,
Yeah, go for it. I can see it. They go a little bit into politics in the prequels, and that's one of the big concern. One of the charges levied. I actually don't mind. There are things I don't like about the prequels, but I don't mind the whole trade war and we're going to bring in the ombudsman and all that. I kind of enjoy the minutia.
Yeah, it enriches it. It makes the galaxy interesting. I think one of the problems with Star Wars is that it can be just too simple. And we want to really sink our teeth into that stuff. One of my complaints about episodes 7 and 8 is that it completely glazes over the politics. I mean, Kylo Ren and the First Order destroy the New Republic, and we have no context in the next movie about what that even means. What does it mean the Republic has been destroyed?
Yeah.
So, kudos to the prequels for really attempting to get into the weeds on that.
I wish they had spent some time there, because I was looking forward to the play out of Leia being in the Senate and that whole struggle that happens. I thought that would be a lot of fun, and I think the impulse of the writers was, we need to always inhabit the position of the side of good is a beleaguered resistance force.
Yeah.
That's what's worked for us, and there's probably some politics there as well that goes into the Trump years and things.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about the new movies and sort of the backstory to those politics, this is in the books, kind of the new canon, so I'm here to explain it if you don't have the time to read those stupid books. So Leia, she faces a controversy about her fatherhood. It gets out that Darth Vader was her father when she is a senator and running to be the chancellor of the New Republic, and it ruins her career. She basically has to resign office and leave because she has become so toxic. She's the daughter of Darth Vader, and she kept it a secret.
I was about to say, because that's not public knowledge, at least at the end of
it did not come out by choice.
6.
First Order spies wanted to undermine her, and they helped leak that information out of the public. Leia's political career is destroyed, and she realizes the First Order is dangerous. They are building weapons of mass destruction, and the New Republic won't stop them. So she leads a bunch of people to go fight them, and that's the resistance. And again, my conservative, libertarian senses are tingling. I'm like, she's like Marco Rubio. She's just somebody who really believes Iran must be stopped at all cost, and nobody is paying attention. She's very neoconservative in some ways. She believes in going out there and confronting the problems.
So in the when we have the resistance in The Force Awakens, we've got the resistance, we've got at that time the New Republic, and we've got the First Order. And the impression I got, because it was kind of hard for me to figure out the interplay, but it seemed to me that it was almost like the Empire had split along the lines of East and West Germany, and that West Germany is the New Republic, and the remnant of the Empire is East Germany. And so I assumed the resistance was resistance fighters within occupied territory, but they don't really clarify it.
Not quite. It's the First Order is much more of a terrorist organization of the neo-Nazi variety. Right. They were described pretty accurately by J.J. Abrams as what happens when the Nazis get to Argentina and they actually manage to reform.
They don't just go into hiding, but they hijack the government.
You have a single batch of loyalists who go there. Mostly it's children of imperial officers who really believed in the empire, saw their parents put in front of tribunals by the New Republic, and they resent the entire thing. And they bring up the empire with crime syndicate money. I mean, the First Order, they bring up the First Order with crime syndicate money in the outer reaches to wage war on the New Republic and make the galaxy great again. That really is the whole
Is that their phrase?
No, they don't say that.
Could that be something of a tell?
It's totally in the backdrop. I mean, just in the context of the entire series, it's about resentment and people who feel like the galaxy was taken away from them, and the First Order, these people trying to get it back. They're very terroristic in their methods, and that's kind of what the resistance is they're fighting back against the First Order, who are kind of pillaging towns and taking over small planets, but are not a huge-scale military threat yet.
Okay. And they still have that fascist element to them, right? They're terrorists, but they certainly look like fascists. They've got the tall boots.
Why not Islamic fascist, right? It's kind of all the same variety. They're totalitarian,
right,
and want to subject other people to their will.
If we're living in the Star Wars universe, I would assume that there are. The Star Wars universe, there is this very clear-cut line between good and bad, right? It's not a world of moral relativism. It is an absolutist world. However, if you were making a pitch for the Empire, what would the pitch that they have be? Would it just be, look, this is a security-focused organization. You're safer under Palpatine. Where were you 20 years ago, Palpatine? Safe. Would that generally be it, or would it just be, shut up, I'm going to shoot you?
You know, I'm not really sure. The whole argument for the Empire is one of those things that it's kind of like tongue-in-cheek. You know, nobody really wants to live under the Empire. But objectively, if you watch the prequels, there's a lot wrong with what's going on in that society. It's very theocratic. There's no accountability. There is no representative government. It's corrupt, head to toe. And that's what pushes people to make those decisions. They say, oh, well, we're told we have a democracy now, but this strong man is offering me something else. And people will gravitate towards that if they feel lied to. And so, you know, the argument for the Empire is definitely one for, I don't know, there's more order and there's more accountability.
Yeah.
In theory, right? Like dictators are never accountable, but you have the governors who kind of like run each system, so there's more point people to go to.
I mean, that's the selling point for fascism, even though I think that this has been historically disproven. But the selling point is, well, they do make the trains run on time. This, you know, and there is this impulse of this is corrupt. We're going to bring in a strong man. He's going to, you know, flush everything out. I can't point to an example of that working well.
Yeah, I mean,
that seems to be the emotional appeal.
And you have that. I mean, that's what Palpatine kind of strikes out of the Old Republic is the vigilante nature of the Jedi Order. He waged a campaign against the Jedi over the course of the Clone Wars to try and undermine their credibility, and they played right into it. You know, luring them into the Clone Wars in the first place and making the Jedi take up arms in the war made the Republic citizens hate them and think that they were the ones who were sort of getting their family members killed. When the Separatists would come and bomb a building or bomb their city, it was the Jedi's fault, not the Republic's fault. And he managed to put them into that position and then managed to crucify them on it. And you don't see this in the films, which is unfortunate, but you know, the media campaign against them too was pretty rigorous.
Is that like, do you find out about this through Clone Wars? Because that would
Clone
cover
Wars,
the same,
and there's a fantastic
the animated
book.
or 3D series.
Yeah, and there's a fantastic book that if you like the politics of Star Wars, you need to check out Star Wars Propaganda. It is a canon picture book of what propaganda in the Star Wars universe looks like. It came out 2 years ago by Pablo Hidalgo, one of the story group members over at Lucasfilm. And it shows you the kind of imagery that the Republic was creating to promote the war, selling war bonds, sounds familiar, and also the kind of propaganda that the Separatists would use to promote animosity towards the Jedi, animosity towards the clones. They were also pro-lifers, which is interesting. They believed that the clones were a moral atrocity. And you sort of see these really clear and familiar lines in the Star Wars universe that you never really noticed until you get this book and see the artwork that people use to try to kind of guide the war in that direction.
Okay, so we've got Palpatine, who is the ultimate politician, you know,
and playing both sides.
Puppet climber, puppet master. But he is kind of emerging as a populist, nascent fascist force. You've got the Separatist. What is the Separatist ideological agenda?
Yeah, that's really interesting because, again, when I was looking over the Star Wars propaganda book...
And hold on, I'm going to pause you real quick. I'm just assuming at this point, if you're still listening to the podcast, I don't need to clarify a number of things. I'm going to assume that you're going down this Star Wars rabbit hole with us, and I don't need to tell you who the Separatists are. So if you're not, it's going to be a delightful conversation, and you should just let this seep into your subconscious. But I suspect that everybody, so I'm not going to bother. So, yeah, Separatists...
Join us in the rabbit hole. So the Separatists, in many ways, are just looking to end sort of the UN-style governing that you see, or not UN, probably like EU-style governing that the Republic offers. They want to be
these
autonomous.
are the Brexiteers?
Honestly, yes,
okay.
they are. And the kind of promotion that went into Count Dooku as one of the leaders of the separatist movement is so reminiscent of like edgy college speakers. If you look at how Count Dooku was sort of beloved in separatist worlds, he was a campus intellectual who preached the ideas of separatism, that you had the right to individual self-government that did not involve Coruscant, and all these bureaucrats deciding the fate of your world based on what they thought was appropriate for your planet.
If I'm living in the Star Wars universe, like I'm bothered by the distance from Dallas to Washington, D.C., which is not even a full planet distance.
Imagine having to be in hyperspace for like 3 days to get to the capital.
I would be somewhat somewhat suspicious of the intentions of the Senate regarding my little planet.
Totally, and I don't want to call them libertarians because they're not. They're a little bit more malicious than that, and highly corporatist.
And I got to say, a count would indicate a certain level of feudal structure, which would not be within the confines of the libertarian worldview of having hereditary lords run things.
Absolutely, and he's someone who comes from royal background, so that's kind of seedy. But there are these conflicting strands in the separatist movement that are hard to wrap your head around. You see the villains in the Star Wars movies, which are the corporations. Yeah. It's all the corporations.
The Trade Federation, the banking clan. It's a clan.
They want less taxes. That's what they say in the movies. So that's the only thing that you get if you watch the films. But there's sort of that backdrop of, well, wait, thousands of worlds left the Republic, and they never in the movie really ask, well, why is that? Are they bad people? Maybe they wanted to leave the Republic for good reasons. They didn't all leave because corporations told them to. They didn't believe that they were getting representation under that model, and they weren't. And the Clone Wars series does a remarkable job of saying that there are good people in the separatist movement who had good intentions about the whole thing, but they didn't know that Sidious was behind it. And that's kind of what poisons the well for conversation on it, because it was the puppet master routine by a bad guy.
Yeah, once you get the Darth Sidious in there, it's hard to come back from it. No, that's fair. Plus, I've been thinking about it. If I were living in the old Republic, a few glaring problems there. For one, when we go to Tatooine in episodes 1 through 3, slavery is a thing. Like out-and-out slavery, where you literally buy people like chattel. And Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan are meeting Anakin and Anakin's mother, and they end up like gambling to get Anakin, and they're like, well, we can only take one slave. I guess we'll leave the other slave here because we're perfectly... We find slavery distasteful, but it's not the mission of the Jedi to end slavery in the galaxy,
Qui-Gon
or apparently the Republic.
respects the order of the planet. I mean, he does not fight to get Shmi off there like on a moral level. He feels more compelled to say, this is the way this planet works, and we're not going to disrupt it, but we're going to get Anakin out of here. And there's been a lot of hand-wringing in kind of past years, particularly with like social justice-oriented fans of Star Wars. They're like, it's a really troubling message.
Yeah.
You go in, you kind of get what you want, and then you leave. They never fought to end slavery on Tatooine, and you'd kind of expect that from Star Wars, where everything is black and white.
Or if I were Qui-Gon Jinn, assuming I was like, you know what, we're really focused right now on trying to increase midichlorians. We're not focused on slavery. I think I would still get back to Coruscant and be like, do you guys want to like pool our resources together and buy Anakin's mom? We could like I'm going to take a vacation, fly back to Tatooine. It's going to be like the equivalent. Coruscant, probably a better kick-it economy than Tatooine. So I could probably just like put a hat around the office. We're all going to put in our lightsaber money. I don't know what Jedi spend their money on for fun.
The Republic neglects all of the worlds on the Outer Rim, which is where Tatooine is based. And kind of another subtext of Star Wars that you hear a lot about in the movies, but they don't take the time to explain, is same with the separatist movement. The core worlds are the loyalists to the Republic. That's where all the wealth is. That's where all the trade is.
This is the Beltway.
Yes, it is the Beltway. And the analogy is so perfect. Flyover country, the East Coast and the West Coast kind of thing. The Outer Rim worlds are the worlds that defect to the separatist movement because they don't feel like they're getting the deal. Their worlds are still run over by slavery, crime. Crime syndicates are tearing them up, and they also are impoverished. They're not part of the wealthy core worlds, and you see the same sort of dynamic that we talk about in our own world all the time. It makes a lot of sense, but it's kind of unfortunate that in the movies they're such simplistic bad guys, the separatists.
It's funny, too, because the themes that you've been striking on, which are a distant, remote, corrupt, and ineffective government, is not typically something heralded by progressives. And the idea of planetary sovereignty that you alluded to earlier, also, that sounds kind of like states' rights, right? But George Lucas is a fairly vociferous critic of Neo-Liberalism.
Quite.
First of all, can you define Neo-Liberalism or approximate a definition for us?
Yeah, Neo-Liberalism is really the economic liberalism argument. So after
the old sense of the word liberal, right?
Yeah,
liberating markets.
After World War II, liberating markets and free trade between nations. It is the underpinning values of capitalism. George Lucas, for someone who is as successful as he was highly resentful of these very things and of neoliberalism's impact on the world. The consumerism, sort of the massive amounts of wealth that were accumulating in the West, and then how he viewed rich people, particularly in the 80s and 90s, as using their money.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of kind of weird, tiny jabs throughout the films, where conceptually, I think one of the neat things about Star Wars is if you want to get political about it, kind of there's a way for everybody to approach it, where they're like, the fight I've been fighting is really heralded here. But when you get into the minutia, like the General Grievous's ship is.
Oh, it's the Invisible Hand.
The Invisible Hand.
So I didn't
He's
know
going
this.
against Adam Smith.
I didn't know this until like a month ago. I knew that General Grievous's ship was called the Invisible Hand, but I didn't think about it. Obviously, that's a broadside against Adam Smith. And it's interesting, in episode 3, the Invisible Hand crashes into the capital of the Republic world, the democratic capital. And within days of the Invisible Hand arriving on the planet, democracy is dissolved. George Lucas has always liked to wink about this stuff, but he has not said much of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the title of the ship is a giveaway, and then there's, there's Newt Gunray.
Yeah, you have Newt.
Who is Newt Gunray's not one of the announcers, is he? In the race, he's one of the senators.
Yeah, Newt Gunray is
separatist.
Well, he is a senator for a corporation. He's with the Trade Federation.
Right. Okay.
And then you also have,
he's one of the kind of fish guys that has a questionable accent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the like semi-Japanese.
Yeah, the semi-Japanese. Which is one of those things too, where there's kind of become a rule in comedy circles over the last it's a fairly new rule, I should say. It's over the last 7 years or so, where you're just not allowed to do an accent from any ethnic group you're not, and that's not the case if you go back 8 years. Like you can, I listened to the Bugle that John Oliver used to produce, and he'll do accents and stuff, and I'm like, you can do that? And now it's like, you don't do that. So when I watch those films, and it's like, a Japanese caricature of fish people, space fish people. And it's like,
It's a little unnerving to watch, actually, sometimes, but, it's Star Wars. So, but you have Newt Gunray. It was a not-so-coy sort of broadside against Newt Gingrich. And one of the other Trade Federation members is an inverted name of Trent Lott, also a Republican senator. And Gunray...
Timeless examples there of Newt Gingrich and Trent Lott. Everyone will remember them in 20 years.
Gunray backwards is Reagan.
Okay, that one, okay.
Yeah,
people know that one.
If you enunciate and sound it out backwards, that's Reagan.
So I want to backtrack for a second, because we were slandering the old Republic and its dismal ability to deal with slavery. One of the things that I'm kind of troubled by is, they own droids who are clearly sentient creatures. Like C-3PO fears death. And then what is it? Episode 3. In A New Hope, when Lars is purchasing C-3PO and R2-D2, he's talking to the Jawas, and they're like, "Don't worry, we put restraining bolts in them because they clearly want to escape because they don't like forced labor. Like, don't worry, we got them, we hobbled them." Like, I look at that, I'm like, is anybody else shouldn't there be a droids' rights revolution that's happening?
Well, there is now. They built in droids' rights to the Solo movie. Did you end up going out to see that one?
I did see it. I don't
well, you might have heard about the SJW droid in the Han Solo film. There is a droid who is a droids' rights activist.
Okay.
And she runs around with her fist up. She kind of talks with some sort of weird
I do remember this now, yes.
Yeah, and she got all this blowback. I thought it was honestly a great character. She got all this blowback from fans on the right, kind of like Daily Wire consumers and everything like that. They're like, oh, an SJW character. I'm like, she's against slavery. She's against slavery.
I'm with you on that.
How is this bad? We clearly see that they are sentient beings. They think for themselves. It is the realization of what AI is going to look like and the kind of questions that we have to ask ourselves about this technology. What happens?
And they're not even programmed to enjoy it. Yeah. Like if I were gonna build a slave, I would build some feedback loop that gave them great pleasure from servicing me in whatever capacity that was, probably non-sexual. But in their case, though, they're just like, no, we're gonna, when Jabba the Hutt has a torture chamber to torture these, which apparently they have nerve endings because you can put a hot poker down on a metal foot and it'll scream. I don't blame that. Actually, I was more bothered by in The Last Jedi, I was more bothered by the side story of the folks who go to the evil rich planet, the profiteering planet, because that to me seemed like an unnecessary aside. I thought the movie was too long, for one thing, and I thought you could have cut that out and it would have been a stronger movie from a plot perspective. And it seemed to me that was just this kind of also, rich people are bad.
Yep. Yeah, it kind of like made me cringe watching the whole thing because it's just this cartoonish villainizing of wealthy classes, of anybody who has money, and paints, the resistance as the obvious sort of opposers to all of that. But what, again, about that scene I think is worth considering is the overwhelming message was there are people invested in the world in war and conflict, and you have these sort of wealthy traders who live on this world, and they sell weapons to the resistance, they sell weapons to the First Order, and they monetize conflict between people in the galaxy. That's not a bad thing. I mean, that's not a bad thing to point out. I mean,
okay, yes. Wait a minute.
It's not a bad thing. Everyone needs to make their money.
Everybody needs blood money.
But there's a reaction against it because I think as people who come from the right, we go, oh, I know what you're doing here. You are making a commentary about capitalism, about the rich, and about the right. But nobody's for war profiteering. That's not something we support. And there was also anger about the animal abuse message. The fact that the resistance characters saw the horse racing going on down below, and they were kind of appalled by it, and they set them free. And then you have all these people going, oh, what is this, a PETA movie? Like, come on. Like, when are we going to just sort of look at this objectively and say, well, I don't actually support animal abuse, and I don't actually support war profiteering, so I'm okay with this scene.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Again, like my main, I thought it was a little bit unnecessary, but I just thought the film dragged on a bit. I thought
it was long.
Cut it down.
I fall asleep still. The Last Jedi is a tough watch.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun film. I watched it a couple of times. I really liked Mark Hamill in it. I thought he did a bang up job.
Came back strong.
Yeah, I thought he did. I thought it went on long. I also thought they just played the cards really weird because they've got a tracking device on their ship that can get them in faster than light, right?
Yeah.
And that technology doesn't exist. So when they find out that they're being trailed by the Imperial fleet, they're like, well, clearly it must be some sort of new technology. I would have been like, there's a traitor here. There's a traitor on board the ship, which would have funneled really very well into the whole vice admiral being kind of squirrely. Yeah. I would have played that very differently, and they instead didn't connect the two. And then, there were a few problems with that.
I'm not a filmmaker. I felt like the movie was a mess. There's very few hard things in the world, and when it comes to Star Wars and making a movie that's exciting, that doesn't make you sort of doze off and like look at your watch, like that's kind of when you know you've sort of failed at making a Star Wars movie because it should be engaging. So Last Jedi has all these reasons for just not being good, but the politics in the movie I thought were pretty interesting. Yeah. It's a very populist movie, particularly when it comes to the issue of democratizing the Force, that the Force is not about sort of this higher elite class of the chosen few, the Jedi Order of the Old Republic, but it is with all of us. It is in everybody. It's in Broom Kid at the end of The Last Jedi. You too can be strong. You can be a hero. And I think that there was this effort with the new movies to kind of look back on the Old Republic and go, you know what, that really was a pretty corrupt and messed up society. And Luke mentions that in the movie as well.
Yeah, and while I like Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite Star Wars character. I love Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw Star Wars, I would have been like 8 or 10, and like something lit up when I watched Obi-Wan. That said, though, when you go back and watch the old movies, the Jedi are definitely elitists. They're very elitist.
Sure.
When like Obi-Wan goes to Naboo and meets Jar Jar, and he's like, another pathetic life form.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. Like, if a Jesuit priest like rolled into Arizona and was like, look at these pathetic life forms. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not appropriate.
Yeah, they're not humanitarians doing outreach and development and feeding the poor. They're intellectuals, and they're sort of like monks, but like living in an actual ivory tower.
I think the closest equivalent is I sort of view them as like a Knights Templar type organization. Sure. Where it's got kind of like a connection to the government, but it's not really the government. It's got a military force associated with it. It's definitely got spirituality associated with it, and it's this kind of towering institution that the other institutions rely on. So I think that's a good approximate. Maybe Jesuits.
Yeah, and nobody voted for the Jedi. And that's kind of what the entire prequels come down to, is nobody voted for them to determine the affairs of the galaxy, but yet they tricked themselves into thinking that they needed to proactively fight the dark side, and they needed to make sure it was snuffed out, even if that meant taking themselves to war and taking the galaxy to war against its own will. they made a whole lot of mistakes as an order, and it's kind of sad that they got wiped out. You know,
Yeah.
I like
I'm
Qui-Gon Jinn,
pro
but
Jedi. I'm sorry that they got wiped out.
you got to learn some lessons. I think that order was out of control, and the prequel trilogy makes that quite clear.
They've got some weird decisions they make. Like at one point, Yoda's like, dangerous it is to combine Anakin with Palpatine.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you doing that then? What's the upshot? Oh, we're just going to try it out. Like the most two dangerous people in the galaxy. We're going to put them together just to see what happens.
Yeah, and so when they find out Palpatine is indeed a Sith Lord, Mace Windu says, we're going to need to remove him and take control of the Senate. He says, take control of the Senate to assure a smooth transition. And you go, what did you just say? You're going to take control of the Senate to ensure a smooth transition? And Yoda says, great care we must take. Yeah, no kidding.
Well,
no kidding. You're taking over the government, and Palpatine rightly portrays it as a coup. That's exactly what it is.
That's true.
Why do Sith not have the right to rule the galaxy?
I'm going to push back here. I'm pro coup. I'm pro coup. I would be with the Jedi on this one. If you could absolutely convince me, like, the president is a secret Satanist, communist, totalitarian who wants to kill something like that. I'd be like, okay, all right. I feel like we're kind of outside the regular fetters of a parliamentary democracy.
It's all inside baseball. The people of the Republic don't know what Sith are. All they see is
they've got
Palpatine.
1,000 years, right? So
nice little old man, and it's clearly such
Warren
a mistake.
Buffett is taking over he seems like a good guy.
Do the Jedi believe in balance of the Force, or do they not? And the great folly that they sort of run into is that they say they want to balance the Force, but what they really mean is they want to snuff the dark out. They want no darkness, only light. And I think that entire bluff or lie gets called by Luke in The Last Jedi. It's like, there has to be balance. There has to be darkness so that you can have light. And the idea that the Republic has to be governed just by people from the light side of the Force who practice this religion, I think that's a huge mistake, honestly.
Well, certainly, if we're taking it, I take it as fairly standard that the dark side's just flat out evil.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I'm not really interested in power sharing with flat out evil people.
It's kind of one of those things. It's like you can't like other side. Both sides are good. But
let's get into this, because I think this is, and they do this pretty well in a number of the books. Like I read Darth Bane a couple of years ago, and I thought it was a very good book. Part of the political discourse on this podcast is trying to get away from this mindset that anyone that disagrees with me is necessarily evil or a moron. Mm-hmm. However, in the Star Wars universe, they are evil, and from what I can tell, the closest approximate to a philosophy of the Sith would be that the Jedi are disengaged, where they've got their own kind of spirituality they're practicing, but they don't want to really have an immediate presence in the world, whereas the Sith want to be practically engaged. But I think they're just super nihilists, from what I can tell. That they would be very big Nietzsche fans, but I'm not sure. What is your take on that?
I don't know where the Sith would fall philosophically, but I have a hard time taking the argument seriously that they just kind of want to wipe out everybody, enslave the entire universe, and sort of stand upon a pile of ashes. The dark side is the pursuit of power. It's the pursuit of more control, and I don't think that ends up being complete and utter annihilation of their own subjects. Kind of going back to the Weekly Standard, Jonathan Last, and the case for the Empire. The Empire was not a great place to live, but they were also trying to completely revamp the society and fight off a rebellion, and that sort of creates more of a hostile police state. And I wonder if it's possible. It's possible that there could have been a version of the Empire and the dark side, a Palpatine as emperor that could have been a stable society. I'm way off the reservation on liberty right now, off the reservation. But it's just like an exercise. Could it have been good if they weren't trying to fight back against this constant guerrilla movement?
Or maybe I'll say if Palpatine had gone, you know what, I've conquered the galaxy. I am now going to sort of devolve power to a planetary level, but we're going to have basic individual rights, and I, as emperor, am going to become a figurehead. Yeah. Then I'd be like, hey, great! This seems like a great galaxy to live in, where the emperor is just cutting ribbons and breeding corgis and dating other royalty and that kind of thing.
Isn't that what everyone really wants? But obviously you can't can't control a society.
But I'm thinking one of the things I would really like to see. I'm excited that Disney's taken over the franchise, and I look forward to having I think it's going to be really fun over the next 40 years where we have a different start. I'm looking forward to 10 years from now where they're like, what if Yoda, when he was younger, was a detective?
Yeah.
Like, I think those are going to be fun. I would love to see a film from the vantage point of an idealist who is part of the Empire. Because I would really like to see, and I assume that they would be betrayed and that, you know, they're following Vader and they're going to learn that this is a terrible thing. But I would like to go through their mental process of maybe they were living on a planet that was in a state of anarchy. Maybe they abhor chaos and they view order as preferable to freedom or to liberty. Or maybe they see, you know, sort of the Republic idea of liberty is a mirage, and so you need. I would want to check that out.
Well, again, I'm your resident reader of books, so kind of a new canon novel where they explain this is called Lost Stars. It's a Romeo and Juliet story, like a story of an imperial female who falls in love with a rebel guy.
This is my weekend.
Yeah, it's so juicy. What a wonderful book. But you have that exact story sort of painted for you is a young girl who grew up in a world that was war-torn by the Clone Wars, ravaged. And what the Emperor represented and what the Empire represented was a chance, one, to put on like white shining armor and make the community better. Be a stormtrooper because it makes your community better. You can fight the criminals and get them out of town. And also sort of bring prosperity to your world. And that's what the Empire promised. Now, they didn't really deliver on that. But you sort of drink that Kool-Aid long enough, you're loyalist to anything. And the one thing that causes a mass defection from the Empire is the destruction of Alderaan, where people realize, you know what, maybe this is about tightening the grip until everyone is dead.
In an American scenario, that may be the equivalent of a president that comes in promising like very, very strong executive control.
Yeah.
And they're actually going to just subsume the House of Representatives and Senate into the executive branch, and you're like, okay, they're doing good stuff, and then they nuke Rhode Island, where they're like, Rhode Island has to be made an example.
It's just too messy. We just have to
get rid of Rhode Island.
New Hampshire is a free state. No more. It's not a state at all.
I want to run a couple of theories by you.
Okay.
These are not my. I wish these were my theories. I probably got them off Reddit, so unfortunately I can't properly attribute them. But one of them that I thought made a very good case was the idea that the Star Wars universe is actually in a prolonged dark age. And I thought it was an interesting point because the premise to it was, first of all, like going back to episode 4, New Hope, why would Lars need to buy a protocol droid to work as an interface between him and the moisturizers that only speak binary? Why not just program them directly? And the implication we're left with, or why torture droids if you could just program them to want to serve you? And the implication is that they actually don't know how to do any of this. They can assemble things. They've got some factories that are laying around where they can build things, but the actual innate technology underlying them has been lost, and so they're kind of coasting.
Well, so now that I've kind of like dabbled with making the case for like, oh, maybe the Empire's not so bad, they're really bad. I mean, they are a communist-style kind of crypto-fascist sort of government. And they dissolve technology companies and absorb most of the companies that are private in the Old Republic into the Empire. They nationalize all the industries. What happens? Technology completely stagnates. Worlds get even poorer. You don't even have access to goods that you might have had in the Old Republic days. Like, the Old Republic is a lavish, sort of like peak days of the Roman Empire sort of situation. And then, right after that, it's just sort of a descent, like a regression. And you get that with a sort of socialist-style government, which the Empire ends up being.
Whenever you hear about nationalizing an industry,
there's no private industries. There's no private industries under the Empire. Which
would explain the prevalence of smugglers in a lot of the things, where like the private enterprise is happening outside the confines of the law.
Yeah, there's no competition. I can't remember some of the name of the companies, but the main manufacturers of droids, the Empire picks one, and of course the one guy who runs the droid company is a member of the Emperor's cabinet. It's cronyism. He selects the droid company that's going to survive under the Empire, keeps them under in his cabinet with political power, and they dissolve all the competition in the market. Same for starships, same for weaponry. So you have to imagine that it's that way for healthcare. You have to imagine it's that way for moisture evaporators, that everything is cronyism and sort of run out of Palpatine's cabinet.
Here's what I'm loving about this so far, Stephen. Literally everything I've brought up, you're able to cite a book on to the point where, have you ever seen Quantum Leap?
No,
So, there's we'll do another episode on that with someone else that's seen it. But there's like this guy has like a hologram that could pop into his head. He's the only. I kind of wish I could do that with you, where I could just like have you pop into my head periodically, be like, "What do you think of the Star Wars universe?
That's
what happened
not canon."
with bowling leagues?" And you'd be like, "Well, actually, there's a book where there's a bowling league on Dagobah, and go into it." I'll run another theory by you, and I like this one because it would redeem the character who I otherwise so detest, and that's Jar Jar Binks. The theory is that Jar Jar Binks is actually a Sith Lord, and that he is the instigating force behind all of the things in episode 1 through 3 that are set in motion. And he's kind of perhaps playing the role of Darth Plagueis. And I like that because it would justify why that character is such a bumbling fool in all 3 episodes.
Why would you want that to be true? You want Jar Jar Binks to be taken seriously and not be a court jester?
Well, here's ideally what I would do. Here's how I would reshape the prequels.
Yeah.
I would cut out Jar Jar Binks entirely.
Yeah.
I would add a little bit of tasteful nudity, which Game of Thrones has shown can work. And I would reverse the interplay between Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi in episodes 2 and 3, because in episode 2 they're very antagonistic, and then in episode 3 they're super chummy, and then all of a sudden Anakin turns to the dark side. Like, he just kneels down and is like, "Join the dark side," and he goes, "Okay." And it would make more sense to me to reverse those roles. But I'd probably cut out Jar Jar entirely. There's a few things I would do. Which brings me to another question. What are your thoughts on the machete cut?
Okay, yeah, so machete order. This is the only way to watch Star Wars if you subscribe to machete order is you watch episode 4.
And I'm going to back it. So this is like, I don't have children yet that I'm aware of, but I will presumably expose them to Star Wars.
Yeah.
This is probably how I'm going to do it.
If you're some sort of Reddit dweller who really believes deeply in sort of this sort of pretentious fandom, you start with 4.
Yeah, New
then
Hope.
5, Empire Strikes Back.
Right, okay.
Then you stop at the reveal of Darth Vader, "I am your father."
Right, okay.
And then you jump back to episode 2, then watch episode 3, and then you go to episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
Right.
Eliminating 1 entirely from the order. I have no love for machete order.
Really?
I think it is nonsense.
I know, this is why it's great. First of all, there's no emotional punch when Darth Vader's revealed to be the father, if you're going chronologically.
Yes.
I think it's good because it's almost like a flashback, where it's like, oh, now that you know this, let's set up the context of how this happened.
It's good. I mean, it's good narrative storytelling. I think Machete is creative because it tells the right narrative story that I think a fan in 2019 would want to like share and surprise their kids with like all the plot twists and stuff. But I kind of question whether or not everybody just already knows when they are able to speak that Darth Vader is Luke's father. It's just part of the cultural zeitgeist. Like, everybody knows. There's no surprises with all of this stuff. And I like episode 1. I think it would be really jarring if you had never seen Star Wars to watch episode 4 and 5, excellent movies, and then watch episode 2, a horrible movie. I think episode 2 is an objectively bad film.
What do you not like about it?
It looks ridiculous. It is definitely a product of its time with like kind of like 2003, 2004 age CGI, where I think we were just really trying.
Oh, is that when they got rid of the Muppets for a while? Because I always really liked that.
Well, they got rid of the puppets. They animated everything, and in a way that just looked gross and not real. CGI has come a long way. I can currently watch like a fully animated film and barely even know. But that was a really crude era for that technology, and I find those movies to be unwatchable. Second, you have Darth Vader, and then you jump back to kind of the worst of Hayden Christensen in episode 2, a very, very whiny teenager. This trope is...
I murdered them like
this
cattle.
trope is real. Like, it's a hard movie to enjoy, and think about it if you had just watched the perfect film, which is Empire Strikes Back, and then taking somebody back like that would be really strange. Episode 1 bridges the technological divide very nicely between the old and the new movies. They're still using puppets, they still build sets, and they have tasteful special effects where it counts. And I think better characters, because Anakin is sort of a background figure of the whole thing. You would lose Duel of the Fates, the great soundtrack. You would lose Darth Maul.
I gotta say, it is a great soundtrack.
The best lightsaber fight of the entire franchise is episode 1.
No, I really like it when Dooku fights Yoda, because that's so unexpected in the lightsaber fight. I actually really enjoyed that.
But they don't even fight.
Stephen, for those that are just listening, Stephen just covered his mouth and looked down. The equivalent of Stephen gasping.
I'm so disturbed. It's the worst fight
We're done
in
here.
all of Star Wars.
Oh.
It's just him flipping and jumping around.
But he's a 400-year-old creature. Like did I get the age right? I'm sounding dumber and dumber by the minute.
I'm not gonna
I
answer
was
that.
so impressed when it happened because I didn't see it coming.
I mean, I was surprised. And surprised, like horrified. Like, what about choreography? What about you block here, I hit here? Oh, it's so great. No, just they like
So obviously it's the
threw
equivalent
water
of it's
onto
like
the control board. And
I already
just
really like Betty White. If
short-circuited.
Betty White suddenly launched into a lightsaber duel, I would be thrilled. I can think of nothing but please let Betty White do this, Disney, before she dies. Bring her into Star Wars. Make her like the super cool ancient I would have rather had her than the Yoda stand-in in Force Awakens.
Are you a comedian? I think you love zany things.
You know what? I like the absurd. I have a touch for the absurd.
Yeah.
What are you excited about moving forward in Star Wars? What would you like to see?
Well, I would like to see in Episode 9, I don't think I will get this, a clear backdrop of what is going on in the galaxy. We just don't know what the situation is with democracy, with the politics. I want that. I host Beltway Banthas.
You and I, the small
all we
subset,
do.
really enjoy that.
Now, what I really wanted from The Last Jedi, which I have not gotten yet, is I wanted the fabled gray Jedi. You know, someone who does not really believe necessarily in just the light or the dark exclusively. And I thought we were going to get it. Luke bashed the Jedi Order, evangelized for having balance between the two. Then Rey goes to redeem Kylo. And instead of, they have the moment where they reach out and he kind of like says, join me. I thought they were going to hold hands and leave there together and start their own thing. Not the dark side, not the light. We're going to fight the First Order and stop all of this. And I thought that was going to be the new gray Jedi. We're everything. The Force in its full spectrum. And they kind of walked away from it because Rey didn't take his hand. And then Kylo went, "Muahaha, now I run the First Order." And I guess he's going to become darker. And I kind of wanted something a little bit more complicated. I wanted some moral relativity and a little grayness.
Which they've got in the books, right? Because in the books, aren't there rogue Jedi?
Yeah, there's rogue Jedi.
Are those Jedi that they get the training and then they just take off?
Yeah, and that happens. Qui-Gon's first apprentice was a rogue Jedi. He turned to the dark, and then he just went to go run a company.
Is that Dooku?
No, actually, before Dooku was Qui-Gon's master.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And that's part of what pushed him towards the Separatist movement. Actually, was when Qui-Gon died, he was so offended that the Jedi had put him in this sort of situation of peacekeeping on the Naboo, interfering in Naboo Trade Federation affairs. He was like, Qui-Gon, my apprentice, died in this. I'm done. And he left the Jedi Order. Anyways, no, Qui-Gon's first apprentice was this guy named Xanatos, and he left the Jedi Order after he got the skills that he wanted, and he was kind of like dark side rogue. And then he went on to go run a mega $1 million corporation as a half Sith.
That's it. He just
Really
does
great
that.
guy.
He just runs Halliburton. That's
really,
it.
really great guy.
Yeah, okay.
Really great guy. There's so many possibilities. But no, I want some grayness in Star Wars, actually. I think the world is very complicated, and while Star Wars is good at saying there is objective good and there is objective evil, we also know that things are complicated. And so I would like to see Star Wars explore that, but I'm a little bit skeptical of the Disney era these days. I started out a huge fan of it, and I'm starting to grow a little weary.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's going to be good. I've got holes with, or I see holes in some of the more recent films. I do think there's going to be a lot of really good, entertaining things that come out. I also, when I get jaded with Star Wars films coming out, I'm always kind of, it's hard for me to assess how much of this is the quality of the series declining versus just me becoming cynical.
Yeah.
Because I wonder, like, for me, anything that I saw and enjoyed as a kid is the sparkling, wonderful, immaculate. I love Back to the Future. I love Star Wars. When I watch the prequels, and I'm, I guess, a teenager at that point, I'm beginning to flirt with the idea that things can be bad and terrible.
Yeah.
And now I'm, just a walking, haggard skeleton of a man.
The original Star Wars are joy incarnate, and it really is not because they're perfect movies. It's because you were the perfect age to enjoy them, and you had an open mind, and that can never be wiped out of your biases. The new films, I don't enjoy them as much as the originals. I actually don't even enjoy them as much as the prequels. But my daughter loves them. She thinks they're fantastic. And so I feel like the only way to properly judge a Star Wars movie is to ask the child who's standing next to you, what did you think of the movie? If they loved it, then Star Wars did a good job.
Okay. Well, I guess that it solves the question. Then I just need to have more kids.
Have many.
And then I'll just have several children, and that will.
You can just find some. Yeah.
I'm fairly confident I will get in trouble for that if I just abduct children and go, hey, we're going to watch Machete Cut.
Tatooine.
Yeah, that's true. We went to Tatooine. Apparently, it's fine. No one cares on Tatooine.
No one cares.
Well, Stephen, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you.
A lot of fun.
We could probably get into this again at some point, or maybe I'll be a guest on your program. But either way, I highly commend yours.